tick-tock, baby, I was born that way. All right, take it out, Lady Gaga. What a gal. Hi, everybody. Lois Barth here, fabulous, fierce ones. Welcome to Transformational Tuesday, also known as Thought-Provoking Thursday. Today's episode is honoring your own wiring, which leads us to my first Loisism, which stands for lessons, opportunities, insights, and solutions, which is we spend more time trying to figure out how to use our smartphone than how our own system works. Case in point, a couple of months back, I'm at the Apple store and getting something fixed, working with the Genius Bar, and I look over and there's a guy, I don't know, mid-late 20s, and he's alternating between being really frantic and really fried, desperately trying to figure out how to use his phone. And in between the Genius Bar appointments, I'm looking over at him, and he's got all these Red Bull stacks up and junk food, and I couldn't help thinking, wow, he's more committed to trying to figure out how to use his phone than honoring his own system. What if he would have stopped after an hour, taken a break, walked around the block? Can you imagine he would have been more efficient, more effective, and felt much better about it? I think we all can relate to that. We get so focused on either what we're doing or our technology that we ignore our own body. And that's what today's episode is all about. So today I'm giving you three sparkle power principles that are going to make a huge difference in learning on how to honor your wiring. The first one is define your default emotional wiring. So what does that mean? Well, a computer has default settings. Guess what? So do you. And in my book, Courage to Sparkle, I call them D-E-W, default emotional wiring. And they go in two categories, non-productive versus productive. I try not to use the word positive or negative. Is it productive, as in producing the results that you want in your life, or non-productive? So case in point, in my life, one of my non-productive do's is overwhelm. I can get overwhelmed rather easily if I'm not careful, which leads me to inertia, despair, not a lot of good stuff. However, conversely, my productive default emotional wiring is I'm wildly curious, and I'm always interested when I get challenged with something. How can I grow through this? How can I learn, and how can I impart that knowledge to my clients and to the people I speak to? So what about you? Now, you may have some things that you go, oh, that's a bad part of me, but anything can be shifted around, which brings us to our second Loisism, which is our greatest assets are often our greatest liabilities. However, our greatest liabilities can become our greatest assets. For example, let's say your non-productive emotional wiring is stubbornness. If you look at it a different way, it can actually be very productive because it causes you to be relentless, resilient, and downright unstoppable. So it's all how you frame it. So that's the number one sparkle power principle. The second one is honor your pacing. I don't know about you folks, but one of my favorite children's stories of all time was The Tortoise and the Hare. And I love that story because it really depicts the different rhythms we all have in life. So I've distilled it down to 4 pacing archetypes from that story, from that fable. And that is the harried hare. You know those people who are always making stories up, I think, and saying, oh, I work really well under pressure, and I love a good deadline, and it pushes me to go harder and harder. I am an adrenaline junkie. That's the way I work best. Well, that could be the case. Some people, like serial entrepreneurs and people who love skydiving. However, there's often a price you pay. Burnout, poor choices, health issues, and also making certain bad financial choices. So watch out, you harried hares. Be careful. Then there's what I call the mindful hares. Those are the ones who, like my friend Nancy, love intensity, love playing a big game. She's a yoga teacher, an herbologist, a massage therapist with a team of 4 people. She travels the world, but she is very mindful because she's always looking at what creates her pacing in a way that honors her. So she has a rigorous self-care schedule. She goes to bed. She eats really healthy. So she's a mindful hare. So let's go to the tortoise section, right? The classic tortoise. Case in point, I have a client of mine. We'll call her Tina. And she would come to me and say, I do everything so slow and everybody around me goes faster and makes fun of me. And I said, well, tell me more about that. Well, it turns out she's wildly successful. She has a PhD. She's a thought leader in learning. English is her second language, and she's really accomplished. And I said, why are you making yourself wrong for your natural pacing? And at that moment, I said, what's wrong with being a tortoise? She said, you know, it's funny because I live in a neighborhood that's really rural, and there's a tortoise that goes past my backyard all the time. I said, well, why don't you name her? She's probably your animal totem. And she's like, Tilly the tortoise. So every time she would look out the kitchen window and she'd see Tilly, she'd be reminded that Tilly, while very plodding, really is actually quite efficient. The fourth category is the turbo tortoise. That's a little like me. It's certain projects you kind of go slow and plodding, but then other times you need a certain amount of intensity to keep the momentum going and not getting bored. So those are the four archetypes. I go into a much deeper detail in my book, Courage to Sparkle, with some really specific strategies on how to look at each archetype and work with them. So the third one, the third Sparkle Power principle is assess your mental and emotional bandwidth. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back to the computer metaphor. Computers, you can have the fanciest Air Schmer, Canair, whatever you want to call it, Mac or other computer, and if you don't have enough bandwidth, you're not going to put all those special applications and all those needs that you may have, right? You have to get more bandwidth. Well, it's the same thing with yourself. If you have a project that's coming up, you really need to assess your mental and emotional bandwidth. If you're at a time in your life that you're exhausted, it's going to take a lot more bandwidth to get that done. If you're at a place where you're saying, hey, I'm in a rut, I need to really have something that's going to really motivate me, your bandwidth might be greater. So those are the three top tips that I would say. Now, I know you're on the edge of your seat. I see it right there. Nice seat, by the way. If you want to learn more tips on how to honor your wiring, send me an email and say, let's talk, TAWK, and we'll set up a time to look at strategies not only for you, but your team, your organization, to let them really honor their wiring. And share this with people in your life on Facebook and people outside of Facebook that you know this could make a difference. And tune in and don't tune out, and learn how to honor your wiring, because that's what the Courage to Sparkle is all about. Talk to you soon. Hey, life is short. Sparkle now. Bye-bye. Take it out, Lady Gaga. 3, 2, all right. All right. Bye.